That public blowout continuing into the afternoon, now casting doubt on the future of U.S. support for Ukraine in their war against Russia. There were truly some astonishing exchanges. We want to play you a significant portion of the explosive showdown in the Oval Office. Take a listen.
And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once? This entire meeting? No.
What was supposed to be a photo op turned into a pointing and yelling match between President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards. But right now, you don't. Yeah, you're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III.
The conversation first turned contentious when Zelenskyy questioned the vice president about Russia honoring any deal.
What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
An emotional President Trump stepping into the argument, telling Zelenskyy America saved Ukraine.
You invited
if you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this, I tell you.
President Trump then pointing the finger at Ukraine, saying Zelenskyy had been difficult to negotiate with.
I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go, and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
With guarantees.
Because
in the end, the president calling the exchange political theater.
I think we've seen enough. What do you think?
What's this negotiation?
This is going to be great television, I will say that.
And before leaving Washington for his Mar-a-Lago estate this afternoon, President Trump warned Ukraine to make peace or lose American support. Zelenskyy says his country will not start the peace talks without a guarantee against another invasion.
Either we're going to end it or let him fight it out. And if he fights it out, it's not going to be pretty.
President Trump has been pushing Zelenskyy to sign a deal giving the U.S. access to Ukrainian resources, all in exchange for investment and the possibility of concrete security guarantees. That was the original plan for today's meeting. And CBS News has been digging into some of the claims made at the Oval Office. Here's what we found. The president claimed the U.S. spent more than $350 billion on the war in Ukraine. The CBS News confirmed team found that to be false. The U.S. government's Ukraine Oversight Group reported Congress appropriated $183 billion, $106 billion went directly to Ukraine. The rest of the money went to funding the U.S. response to the war and aid to other impacted countries. And today's meeting at the White House drawing immediate reaction from around the globe. A short time ago, I spoke to Leon Panetta, former U.S. Defense Secretary, CIA Director, and White House Chief of Staff.
I think it was a terrible and disturbing moment to have the president and the vice president having a shouting match with an ally who's kind of fighting to save their democracy in Ukraine. And what it meant for me is that it kind of has turned our foreign policy on its head, because for 80 years since World War II, the United States, both Democratic and Republican presidents, have pretty much stood for the same thing. They've stood for world leadership, supporting our allies, standing up to tyrants, and supporting strong democratic values. And today, I think that was all turned on its head.
So as President Trump, he's been pushing for access to Ukrainian natural resources in exchange for U.S. assistance. Zelenskyy left the White House without signing that agreement. So how do you think this develops moving forward?
Well, that's what concerns me more than anything, because rather than being an opportunity to really move towards some kind of peaceful solution, I think the signal that came out of that meeting in the Oval Office is going to result in a continuing war in Ukraine. It sends a signal to Putin, frankly, that he can continue to fight because he has nothing to lose. And Zelenskyy has no other alternative but to keep fighting in order to protect his democracy, and pretty much doing that with the support of Europe and not the support of the United States. So it's going to lead to more warfare in Ukraine.
What do you think Vladimir Putin's reaction is to all this?
He's cheering. He's cheering. The news out of Russia by the commentators, the news that they are all delighting at what happened in the Oval Office, because they think essentially that the president and the vice president basically have accepted Russia's talking points when it comes to dealing with Ukraine. And I have to say that there's no question that when Trump says that he can trust somebody like Putin, who's a tyrant, that raises real questions about just exactly where this administration stands when it comes to either supporting democracies or supporting autocracies in the world.
Others we have spoken to have said the most remarkable thing about today is that it all played out in front of the public eye. My question is, and you've probably been in some high-level negotiations, have you seen these kinds of exchanges behind closed doors, and now it's just shocking to us because we get to see it for ourselves?
Well, as a former chief of staff to a president of the United States, the last thing you want is what happened today in the Oval Office. To have that kind of shouting match take place before the cameras and to show the disruption that obviously was present.
Well, we got a chance to talk to Face the Nation moderator Margaret Brennan about how the world is responding to that Oval Office meeting.
This explosion in front of the cameras really did cause reverberations around the world when it comes to allies in Europe concerned that the Americans are walking away from the commitment to defending this democracy against the democracy of Ukraine, against the aggression from Vladimir Putin. Remember, it was earlier this week that the Trump administration changed the U.S. policy and told diplomats not to acknowledge Russia was the aggressor during proceedings at the United Nations. So there is a big concern here that this isn't just a clash of two personalities, that this is a change in the alignment of the United States.
And coming up at 5:30, we're going to hear from a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, get his thoughts on what this means for the relationship between the two countries.